Good day to you as well, Jamilo. Right, so great to have you here with us. So along the way, if you guys have any questions, right, if you have any charts that you want us to take a look at, right, just feel free to type them under the questions chat. Okay, so with that, let's kickstart our session. So just a quick introduction of myself. I'm Li Xing. You can also find me on LinkedIn, right? So if you're watching a recording of this, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn if you have any questions. If you're with us live, right, just put your questions under the questions chat. So just a quick disclaimer before we get the session started. So the information presented here, it's not to be treated as investment advice. It's for educational purposes only. So this is the agenda that we will be covering for today, right? So first we will start off with taking a look at market phases. So for this, we will cover the basics of it, right? Looking at uptrends, downtrends, as well as ranging markets. So following that, right, we will take a look at how we can identify supply and demand zones to basically identify continuation or reversal patterns. So for this, we will hop onto our trading view charts and take a look at this example, right? And of course, along the way, right, I'm seeing quite a few requests on the charts, right? So we have requests for Euro dollar as well as Aussie dollar. So I'll be taking a look at that as well. Right, so got your request, right, Elias and Abraham. Right, so good afternoon to you guys as well. So yeah, so we'll be taking a look at that, right? So for both Euro dollar and Aussie dollar, right? So those are the setups example. We will also be looking at how we can actually apply the concepts on these setups. Okay, so with that, let's hop on to our PowerPoint. Right, so this is just covering the basics, right? Looking at market structure. So this is more for the benefit of those who are not familiar with market structure. So the idea behind this is simple, but at the same time, right, if you combine this across the different time frames, right, this can actually give us an idea or at least a clue as to where markets might be heading. Right, so if we take a look at it, right, in an uptrend first, we see price forming consecutive higher lows and higher highs. So two things to take away from this, right? Just looking at this market structure itself, we can see that when price starts forming consecutive higher lows and higher highs, we have this high that can be used as a potential profit or potential target, right? So when price starts coming into this zone, right, this is an area that we can potentially get out of the position. That's one. The other thing is that when prices are in this bullish market structure, in general, we don't see a violation of this low. So you can see that when prices are in an uptrend, these lows themselves are not violated. Now, how this can be useful in our analysis is that if we do identify a potential demand zone, right, for an entry, then what happens is that we want to ensure that if price breaks below this, right, this is a case where we want to get out of the position. Right, so those are the two things to basically take away from, right, with this, right? So you can see that when prices are in a clear uptrend, if it pulls back into a support or demand area, right? So assume that this is on a higher time frame. If it pulls back into a support area, what we're looking for is that we're looking for consolidation on the lower time frame before it goes in the direction of the higher time frame, right? So let's say if we're bullish on the higher time frame, we're seeing this bullish market structure coming into a demand zone, right? You can see that we'll usually see a lower time frame change its market structure before it reverses. And this makes sense, right? Because if price starts pushing to the downside, this whole move to the downside that caused the pullback leg, this will be observed with lower lows and lower highs on the higher time frame. Okay, so that's where we are right now, right? So this is in terms of an uptrend. Now let's take a look at a downtrend, right? So I understand that across the other sessions, right, I have been going through the different the market structures, right? So this is simple, but at the same time, it's very useful, right? So try to get a hang of it. Okay, I'm seeing requests in terms of technical issues via the app, right? You can't see the charts. You guys streaming in from the app, are you experiencing the same thing? So I'm getting a request that you cannot see the charts, right? So for the rest of you guys who are streaming in via the app, right, can you see my screen? So you should be able to see the charts. Right, if you can't see the chart, can you just try exiting the app and entering again, see if that works for you? Right, so just try that and see if that works. Right, at the same time, for those of you guys who can actually see the chart, right, via the live stream, can you please type your comments under the chat? Right, at the same time, right, if you still can't, okay, that's awesome, right? So via Zoom, it's no issue. So for those of you guys who still can't access it, right? One other way to go through it would be to sign up via Zoom, right? So maybe let me just bring up that instead. Just give me one moment while I bring this up. Right, so if you can't access it via the app, right, please sign up via Zoom if you still can't see it via the app. But I'm not getting other comments on that, right? So can you guys just check if you can see via the app? If you can't see via the app, right, let me just go to vantagemarkets.com. Right, so go to vantagemarkets.com under education and tools, educational webinars. So let me just send this link, right? You can sign up for it here. Okay, so so I think it's only occurring for some of you guys, right? I have requests, I have comments that say that they can actually see the screen. So maybe you might want to either refresh your app or just try sending it, just try signing up for it via the website. Okay, thanks for this, Edwin. Okay, so back to our market structure slides, right? So you can see for this, right? Let me take a look at the next one. So this is a downtrend, right? So in a downtrend, we see successive lower lows and lower highs. So in this example, we can see here as well, right? So when prices are in a bearish market structure, generally the highs are not violated. So which means that if price does a pullback into this zone, right, the general direction, it's still bearish. If it comes into a higher time frame supply and we're seeing consolidation, we can target this low that caused that pullback. So I'll be showing examples on how we can actually apply this in a moment, but that's the idea, right? So the highs are not violated. When price does a pullback, right, the general bias, right, it's that we could still see potentially a reversal targeting the low. That's one, right? And the other, it's that you can see that this low, essentially that caused a pullback, this can be potential targets for us. Right, so this is an example of an example on TradingView that shows a bearish market structure. Okay, and the last one that we have, right? So the last one, it's in a ranging market. So in ranging markets, this is slightly different. You can see that in ranging market, what happens is that generally we have a clear support resistance level that price adhere to, right? So with this move itself, this support level, right, one simple way to think about it, it acts as a floor. So if price comes into this zone, we see a bounce off this region, right? And resistance level acts as a ceiling, right? So if it comes into this zone, we can see sellers coming in, right, to push price down. So one thing to note with this is that beyond these levels, right, we have usually at this point, you have sell side liquidity lying just slightly below, right? So the converse is true, right? So with resistance, you have buy side liquidity lying slightly above. Now, what this means is just basically at this point, right, you have a large pool of buyers who are willing to buy slightly lower, willing to sell slightly lower, right? And at the same time, you have a large pool of buyers over here, which are willing to buy slightly higher, right? So that's the idea. So imagine if price comes in, right? If it comes into this region and before it bounces up, what it has to do is to tap into this potentially, right? Come into this region where you have enough buyers or rather enough sellers who are willing to sell to the existing buyers, right? At a lower price. And the opposite is true, right? So in terms of the buy side and sell side liquidity, right? So in this region, we're looking at buy side liquidity. Essentially, this can come in a form of stop losses, or it can come in a form, so stop losses for the sells, right? Or buy stops. So imagine if you're expecting price to break to the upside. There are two ways to play this, right? One is that we wait for price to break and close to the upside before waiting for a pullback with a further move up. The other way is to place a buy stop, right? And if it's triggered by a news event, right, this buy stops might be triggered when price just rallied much higher. Okay, so this is that, right? In terms of ranging markets, right, how you can actually use this, right? So there are a few ways, right? One is to trade just between this range, but with this, right, you have to be careful that price could also sweep the lows and the highs. That's one. The other is to wait for a break of this range. So if you wait for a break to the upside and a close, right, this ranges on the different time frames, right? This range, essentially, it's when price broke to the upside and do a retest, right, then creates a potential demand zone. And likewise, right, if we see a consolidation and a break to the downside, a retest of this, right, this range can serve as a potential supply. Now, you might ask, right, what how can we actually identify these ranges? Right, so if you take a look at this range, right, these ranges on the higher time frames, they can come in a form of doji. Why? Right, because if you take a look at any doji, doji itself just means you have a high and low that price respected. And this high and low, it's a range, right? So this is basically the support and resistance level on your lower time frames. And the lack of direction, right? When prices open and close, the open and close price are very similar, or at least very near one another. Okay, so in terms of how we can use this range, it's really using these areas as potential supply demand areas that we can see reversal from. Okay, so with that, right, let's hop onto our charts. We'll take a look at a few examples as to how we can apply all this. Right, so let's take a look at that, and following which, right, we will be covering on Aussie dollar and Euro dollar as well. Okay, so let me just bring up the chart. Okay, so let's take a look at an example, right? So I'll just bring up Euro dollar, right? Since we are going through the examples, and let me just bring that up. Right, so if you take a look at Euro dollar, let me just share my screen. Okay, so if you take a look at where we are on Euro dollar, right, on the different time frames, right? So within this move, right, take this example, you can see that just on the monthly or weekly, this whole region that we have, right, on the monthly, if you take a look at the highs and lows of this candle, right? So before that, right, one thing to note is that when we take a look at the monthly time frame, one candle basically represents the price movement for that month. So for the specific month, right, price actually reach a certain high and low, right, and the open and close price. So it shows us two things. It shows us the direction for that month, and at the same time, right, this can come in a form of potential the highs and lows, right, would tell us the market structure. So if you take a look at just this, the most recent price movement for that month, right, you can see that prices pushing into this zone has been forming higher lows and higher highs, right? So just marking out the candles highs and lows, you can see price from higher lows and higher highs. And this is the last high that we have. Even if I were to put this level in close, you can see this is the last high that we have here. But beyond that, right, so if we're in a bullish market structure, earlier we mentioned that we can see the highs can be used as potential targets. Highs are constantly being run in a bullish market structure. Your lows are not being violated. And we see this here, right? So prices forming higher lows and higher highs. You can see that the lows are not being run at this point, right? And price pushed up. It came into the high again. With this move, you can see that price came in, wick into the high. But at the same time, right, what happened on the monthly is that while it wicked above it, it did not actually close above this zone. So if you take a look at this high, the previous high that we have, which is this zone here, you can see that price went above this region, right? But at the same time, it did not close above it. Now with that, right, if price did not close above this zone, right, what it creates is that this region, or the low that we we saw that pullback from, right, this becomes a potential target. So we can see that what happened following that, price actually broke beyond this zone. Right, so it broke to the downside, and we're seeing a break beyond this, right? So that's on the monthly. This is on the monthly. It hasn't closed for this month, right? So depending on how this candle closed, right, we have to wait for the month end, right, to see whether price actually broke and closed below this low. But at this point in time, right, on the monthly, right, it created a support region where we saw a reaction of previously. You can see that price came in once, right, and we're seeing that strong push up. So on the monthly, right, what we're trying to do here is that we're trying to identify zones or potential support resistance levels that price could reverse from or react from, right? But at the same time, because these are higher time frame zones, right, we need lower time frame confirmation. So using the same example, you can see that if we have identified this region on the monthly, you can see this region here, right, and where we could see a potential bounce to the upside, right? With this move, you can see that price has to reflect, the market structure has to shift first on the lower time frame. Now, just to clarify a bit more on what I mean by this, right? You can see that when price pushed to the downside, the whole move that we have here, pushing into this potential area, right? I don't know if price is going to react off from here. It could just break this zone altogether, right? That's one. So two possible scenarios, right? One is that we are seeing that consolidation before it pushes slightly higher. The other is that it just breaks right through it. So those are the two schools of thought, right? When you move down to the weekly, you can see that weekly has not shown any signs of bullish move or reversal, right? Just this whole move itself, it has been forming lower lows and lower highs. If you take a look at it just in terms of the most recent candles, right? And if you look at it on the daily, right, it's the same thing. We are seeing, again, bearish move, lower lows and lower highs. If you're to take a look at just this whole movement itself, daily 4 hours, right, you are pretty much seeing the same thing, right? So lower lows, lower highs to the downside. So this is where we are right now, right? So if you move back, right, to the daily time frame, we have a low that prices are coming into this zone, right? This region here on the daily, you can see that this is still bearish. We are seeing this region, right? So price broke and closed to the downside. This candle serves as a potential supply on the daily time frame. So I'll just create this move here, right? So this is where we are currently, right? So again, right, you can see that on the lower time frame, if price starts consolidating on the lower time frame, right, and if it does push into this supply region, right, this whole move to the upside, it has to be in the form of higher lows and higher highs on the lower time frame. So that will be reflected first. So if price starts coming into this zone, right, how do we know whether price would respect this area or if it's going to sweep slightly above it before it continues lower, right? So for that, again, pushing into this zone, you need that change in market structure. So the idea is that if price on the lower time frame starts forming this bullish market structure, right, as long as this bullish market structure holds, it could continue, right, potentially breaking this zone altogether. But if we see a respect or acknowledgement of this zone as a resistance, right, you will see that this move, it's usually accompanied with a break in structure on the lower time frame. Right, so with that, let's focus on this region now. We move to the 4 hours. Right, so on the 4 hours, what we have here is that you can see that price starts consolidating within the zone. Right, so this area here, you can see price came in, right? We are seeing equal lows being formed. Oops. Price came in, right? You're seeing equal lows being formed here. With this move, so you can see that price came in, it created a low. And then what happened after is that we're seeing that consolidation, but price did not actually break and close to the downside, right? So if you look at this region, you can see that price did not break and close to the downside. We are seeing a test of this area here as the high, right? So this range that we're looking at. So on the 4 hours, right, if price breaks and close above this region, right, it could create a potential pullback. So let's see, right? Not that clear on the 4 hours, right? Now let's take a look at the 1 hour. So on the 1 hour time frame, this is currently where we are right now. So you can see this whole move that caused the reversal. It creates two things, right? So one is that we have this region. So you can see price forming lower lows and lower highs to the downside, right? So this whole move, price came in, it formed lower lows, lower highs. And then what happens that it came in, right? Price came in, it wicked below the low. That's one, right? And it also broke structure. So you can see this whole move, right? Price came in and broke and closed above the high, this region here. And if I put these levels in close, you can see the same thing as well, right? So lower lows and lower highs, this whole area, lower lows and lower highs. And then following that, what we have is that we have a break and close to the upside. Price retesting again, the zone that caused the break in structure. So you can see a break to the upside. Price came in, tested the low, and we're seeing this area being tested as a potential demand zone. So this is where we are on the 1 hour time frame. Right, so I'll just highlight this zone here. Right, so you can see what happened. Right, price broke to the upside. It came into this zone and it's testing this region. Now, in terms of the 1 hour, right, so the 1 hour time frame, you can see this candle, right? So if the candle closed above the previous one, right, then creates a demand region. It shows that we see that you have demand area coming in, but also more importantly, right, when price breaks to the upside, if it pushes back into the demand zone, what it creates is also a potential target, right? So if price does move much higher, right, it could potentially come into the 4 hours. You can see we have a 4 hours area here, right? So the last region that caused the break to the downside. So if price pushes into this zone, this area here, and it does a pullback, right, you can see again, if it does a pullback into this region, over here, right, this area only becomes a potential demand if your lower time frame changes market structure, right? So if I were to just use the same example, right, let's just look slightly backwards, right? So this region here. So you can see what happened, right? Price consolidated, swept the low, it broke above, right? You can see a break and close to the upside. So it creates this region as a potential demand. You can see this low here. So this region as a potential demand, right? With this, you can see that this high becomes a potential target on the 1 hour time frame, right? Which means that if price starts coming into this zone, your lower time frame turns bullish. this area, it's a potential target. But beyond that, right, where's the next target? Right, it depends on that pullback. So if you move down to the lower time frame, let's say on the 15 minutes time frame, you can see this whole region. Right, so this whole area where price came in, it tested this zone, right? So it pushed to the downside. This whole level, this whole region, again, you see lower lows and lower highs, right? So to the downside, right? Just highlighting the candles low and high. And then beyond that, what happens, right? Price actually broke and closed here. So the same thing, right? If you move to the lower time frame, you can see the consolidation. So if you're on the lower time frames, you can see this area, right? So price came in, you're seeing lower lows and lower highs, this structure, right? Lower lows and lower highs. And again, right, if it breaks beyond this could continue. But what happened is that you can see on the 5 minutes, right, price came in and you're seeing that break and close to the upside here. Price broke and close to the upside. This area has not been tested, right? So this is a potential demand zone on the lower time frame. But again, right, if it does a pullback from here, we're not taking any immediate setups, right? But rather we're just waiting for price to come in to respect this region, right? Before we see that reversal. And the high that caused that pullback will create a potential target. Okay, so I hope that this helps, right, in terms of the Euro-dollar review, right? Now let's take a look at another setup, right? We have requests for Aussie dollar. So let's take a look at that. Right, so if you take a look at where we are on Aussie dollar, right, before that, actually, we should be taking a look at dollar index. But okay, let's just review Aussie dollar first, right? And I'll take a look at dollar index. Oh, wrong spelling there. Okay, so let's take a look at Aussie dollar on the higher time frame, right? So if you take a look at it on the monthly, right? So on the monthly time frame, we have this region, right? So I'm just going to erase all this move, right? So on the monthly, you can see the levels don't change much from the last time we did our analysis. We have a support area here where price consolidated. We see that strong push to the upside. You can see that prices are currently testing this region, right? So coming into this zone doesn't mean anything, right? As long if the lower time frame is still bearish, right? Price could break this zone altogether. So that's on the monthly. And we have also highlighted a resistance region on the monthly. You can see that it was the previous break to the downside. Price broke to the downside, this region here, right? So depending on how this month's closed, right? If price still holds below this low, then this still serves as a resistance on the monthly time frame. Okay, now when we move down to the weekly, on the weekly, you can see this region, right? So again, coming into this zone, let me just remove all of that. So you can see this area on the weekly, right? So we have a support, turn, resistance region. If you put these levels in close, you can also see a sharp push as a support, right? So we saw rejection, this region holding as a support before price broke to the downside. And so this is currently where we are on the weekly, right? And beyond that, we also have a low. The price came and test multiple times. You can see here. But the general direction, so if you just notice this move, right, on the weekly, you can see this bearish market structure, lower lows, lower highs to the downside. And this is the last region that we have. You can see price broke and closed to the downside, right? And following that, this area becomes a potential supply, right? So if I were to just narrow down the most recent move, you can see that this area becomes a supply here. So this is why we're seeing that range. And you can see once price breaks and closes below this zone, right, it validates this region as a supply, right? And it pushes back into this zone, right? And following that, you can see that this low, so if I were to just draw out this whole market structure, this is essentially what we're seeing here. Lower lows and lower highs. Price does a pullback into a potential supply region here, which is this area that we've highlighted. And this low that caused the pullback, right, becomes a potential target. So this area, this is the low that caused the pullback. So you can see that price came in, right, tested multiple times. So it basically went into the supply region on the higher time frame, right, and we're seeing that reversal. So just looking at this move itself, if you move down to the lower time frame, you can see that this gets a bit choppy, right? So on the lower time frame, you can see that when price does this pullback here, right, it does a pullback into this zone. You can see again, right, higher lows and higher highs before this fails, right? So this on the daily, right? So the lower the time frame you go, the clearer the market structure, right? So let's say if price pushes into the supply, which is really beyond this, right? So following that break in structure, price pushes back into the supply. If you move to the 4 hours time frame, you can see this structure, right? So again, we have this whole move, right? You can see higher lows, higher highs, higher lows, right? And this bullish market structure, so price could continue to the upside. But what we have here is that beyond this, you can see a strong break and close to the downside, right? Price broke and close to the downside. You're seeing it here as well, right? Retest again. When it breaks and close to the downside, you can see that you can use actually the last candle that we have, right? Or the extreme of this move as a potential supply. So price did a pullback. But even then, right, if you want a lower time frame confirmation, so this zone, right? So you can see that when price starts coming into the 4-hour zone, we have this low, right, as a potential target that caused the pullback. So you can see this whole move caused the pullback on the higher time frame. So when price starts breaking structure, because when it pushes into this weekly supply, right, you'll see bullish structure. So higher lows, higher highs to the upside. So you can see this move, right? So when there is a confirmation in terms of a break in structure, it creates a 4-hour supply region here, right? So if you can either enter just based on the 4 hours, or if not, right, just again, use the same method. Just go to the lower time frame, you're seeing that change in market structure, right? And you notice this, right? When it pushes back into the 4 hours, I can highlight it, either put these levels in a line chart, or you can just see this move, right? So if I put it in a line chart, or just highlight the highs and lows, you can see higher lows, higher highs. And then what we have here, a strong break and close to the downside. So this is confirmation that prices are respecting this higher time frame supply, right? Because if not, we could still see this move. It could push deeper into the zone, right? If you look at it on a 15 minutes, you can see the structure as well. Higher low, higher high, and a break to the downside. And yeah, so that's basically how it is, right? So that's on the 1 hour time frame, right? So you can see price came into this region, and then what happened, right? This whole move that we have to the downside, this whole area, if you put these levels in close, you're seeing this structure, lower lows, lower highs, right? Because every push to the downside will be accompanied with a bearish market structure on your lower time frame. And once the target is reached, which is the low that caused that pullback, right? Recall this low that we have on the weekly. Let me just move back to the weekly. You can see this low, right? So it's basically the low here. So this low that caused the pullback on the weekly, you can see that once this target is reached here, right, on the lower time frame, right, for this whole pullback on the lower time frame, you're seeing again that change in market structure, right? So if I were to just highlight this move, let me just put this in a different color. Let's put this in, let's say in green, right? So we want to focus on this whole move. You move down to the lower time frame, you can see that this whole move, right, for this whole pullback to happen, right, it's just one bullish candle on the daily, but at the same time, you're seeing that bullish market structure on your 15 minutes. Or if you don't want to go to such a smaller time frame, right, even on the 4 hours, 1 hour, you'll see this structure, right? So change in market structure, price broke to the upside, and you're seeing again that higher lows and higher highs. Okay, now let's take a look at where we are now, right? So we have this zone on the weekly. You can see this region. So let me just remove all of that, right? We have this, the same region. My price came in on the weekly. You're seeing this area that has been tested 3 times, the low here. And so depending on how this wick closed, right, if price breaks below the previous low that we have here, right, on the weekly time frame, it could still be bearish. So depending on how this wick closed, right, we have this whole zone that caused a pullback, right? So if this wick closed above this region, and we are seeing on the lower time frame, you're seeing bullish market structure, what it creates is that this high on the weekly that caused that pullback becomes a potential target, right? So that's the weekly high here. So now let's move to the lower time frame. So if you're on the lower time frame on the daily, right, we're seeing a sweep of the low. So this would apply in ranging markets, right? So if you take a look at this, just this whole move alone, right, we're seeing price trading within the range. So previously we covered on market structure. We talk about how when prices are trading, right, we have a support resistance level. The prices are trading, and beyond that, right, you can see that price might sweep slightly higher. Right, in this example, it didn't really sweep higher. The general bias is still bearish on the higher time frame, right, with the bearish move. But with this move, we can see that price could sweep slightly lower to the downside, right? Tapping into this pool, because lying slightly below this area, we have sellers, right, waiting either for a break to the downside. They could have sell stops triggered here, right? Or even buyers with their stop losses. So if you're buying, your stop loss is slightly below, right? The stop losses are basically sell orders. Okay, so with this move, we can see that if price starts consolidating within this region on the daily, right? So on the daily, there's not much at the moment, right? So we could still see some consolidation here on the daily. We have a low the price came in. So within this whole leg itself, you can see that this movement to the downside, pushing into this zone, we're still again seeing lower lows and lower highs. Right, so if price pushes back into this zone, we could still see this low being tested. So if price pushes into this zone, right, two things. When it pushes into this region, it creates a high as a potential target, right? So if this region is tested here, you can put an alert over here. If price tests this region, right, then this is an area that you want to revisit, right? So if it does not close below this area on the lower time frame, we can look for short-term longs, right, targeting the high that caused the pullback. Okay, so that's on Aussie dollar, right? So I hope that answers your question. Right. Okay, I have a question on via the stream. Are the zones marked or are the zones marked already in the charts, or I mark them myself? Yeah, so I mark this you have to mark it yourself. Right. So it can be just based on the most recent price movement, right? So if you want to look at it from the higher time frame, right? Just look at the most recent price movement. If prices broke below the last low, right? Just in terms of a break. This is a break in market structure, right? So if you look at it, lower lows, lower highs, right? If price does a pullback into this zone, as long as the high is not violated, but we could see a potential pullback, right? And this low that caused the move to the upside is a potential target, right? So if price starts coming to higher time frame supply, you're looking at basically a change in direction on the lower time frame to show that this is indeed a supply zone that prices are respecting. Okay, so now let's take a look at another setup, right? You're most welcome, Ibrahim. Right, glad that this helps. So let's take a look at gold and Bitcoin. So if we take a look at where we were on gold, right? We were on the monthly, so you can see this whole region, right? So price came in, we have that test of the resistance level 3 times here. And you're also seeing a breakout and a retest of the zone, right? So this region, right? So depending on how this month's candle close, big part of it is dependent on how this month's candle close. If we take a look at it on the weekly time frame, you can see that this whole move, right? Price came in. Previously, we had this region as a potential demand, this area here, right? Price went beyond that. And if you look at the lower time frame, you can see that there wasn't any change in market structure. So this whole move, right? Previously, if you move down to the daily, you can see that on the daily, right? Prices were still in a bearish move. It was forming lower lows and lower highs, and this just strong move to the downside, right? And also partly driven by dollar strength. So if we take a look at dollar index, we'll take a look at it in a moment, right? You can see the dollar index is still in a bullish trend. So on gold, right? This area, right, at least on the higher time frame, so there isn't much we have now that this region it's broken, right? We have this whole move, right? You can see that price came in, the low that caused that pullback is this area, right? So if today it actually broke and closed to the downside, right, then this would be the new region of supply, this area here. So depending on how this today closed, right, if you take a look at it on the daily, right, so two things, right? One, it's that we could see a spike or pullback, right? So because this daily candle has yet to close, and so we could see a spike here, or if it breaks below, right, a potential pullback before movement to the downside. So if we do see any kind of pullback, right, again, that would first be reflected on your lower time frame. So let's say if we move down to the 4 hours, right, or here, you can see that just within this whole move itself, we have this consolidation. So price came in, right, we're seeing this consolidation here. So you see lower lows and lower highs again, it creates a 4 hours zone, right? So on the 4 hours, we still have a supply region here. This area on the 4 hours time frame, right? So you can see this area. So if price does a pullback into this zone, right, it creates two things, right? One is that it creates a low as a potential target that caused a pullback. And of course, this whole move would have to be accompanied with, again, bullish market structure. So any signs of reversal would come in when price starts changing, right? If not, it could just continue this bullish structure, right? Breaking the highs altogether. So with this itself, right, let's look at the 4 hours. So what we have here on the 4 hours is that you can see price testing the low, right? So we have the low being formed here. At the same time, right, you can see that within this high itself, this region, right? So if I were to just draw out this move, you can see price, we have a strong move to the downside. Price came into a lower time frame supply, tap back into the low, the target, right? So if I move down to the 1 hour, you can see this more clearly. You can see this move, right? So this zone, right? You can see that prices were in a bearish structure. And then what happened, right? Following that, when we have a break and close to the downside, you can see price broke and close to the downside. It pushes back into the supply region, right, on the 1 hour time frame. push back into this zone here, right? So it creates this low as a potential low. So if price comes back into this area, right, on the 1 hour, right? So the overall bias, at least on your 1 hour, 4 hours, is still more bearish, right? So if price comes back into this zone, right, which we could potentially see during New York session, right? If it comes into this region and it does not break and close below this area, right, then I'm looking for potential move to the upside, right? Targeting the high that caused that pullback. So this area here, right? So you can see that within this region, right, this whole move that caused the pullback, it created this low, right? So if this is the area that we see, right, if price comes back into this zone, right, that's one. The alternative is to wait for the break in structure on the 4 hours time frame. So this is the 4 hours region. You can see the range that it's trading within. It's if price breaks and close to the upside here. If price breaks and close above, right, it creates a potential demand, right? So think of it like a range that price traded within, and we're seeing a break and close to the upside. This area creates a potential demand. Again, if price comes back into this region, right, this whole pullback will be accompanied with lower lows and lower highs. So right now on gold, right, at least on the higher time frame, if you're on the daily or 4 hours, right now, this whole move, right, it's still in a bearish market structure. We have a potential supply area here, right? So if we do see any reversal, right, usually we will see consolidation first, and you can see that it will start creating higher lows and higher highs, and these highs themselves are used as potential targets. So with just this alone, right, you can see that we don't have any potential highs, right? Even if I to take short-term move to the upside, this is one potential resistance, but beyond that, there's no high as a potential target. So if you're in a bullish market structure, any pullback into this zone, you can see that it creates a high as a potential target. Okay, so I hope that answers your question, Harris, right? You're most welcome. Okay, now let's take a look at Bitcoin. So if you take a look at Bitcoin, right, on the higher time frame, so this is the monthly, right? So we have the monthly region, right? I believe this was requested in one of the live analysis session. And so these levels have not changed much, right? So you can see that we have a resistance area that price traded within. We saw a break to the upside. So we have this two zones, right? One is this resistance region, which price tested, and right now we're seeing a retest of this region. That's one. And of course, the support area here where price failed and broke to the upside, right? And if you look at, if you're highlighting it just based on specific candles, right, we also have this doji, right? So if you notice this doji, right, just bringing our attention to this doji, you can see this doji here before we saw that strong break to the upside. If you move down to your lower time frame, right, this doji, it's basically a range. You can see this range. We have a support resistance level price traded within for that specific month, right, before a strong break to the upside. So previously we mentioned on zones, on ranges, right? We talk about how we have a support resistance level in the slide, right? So this area, right, it can be also identified in terms, you can just look at doji patterns, right, on the higher time frame, which is what we saw here. You can see this monthly doji. If you have to narrow down the move, right, essentially on the weekly and daily, you have that range that price traded within before a strong break to the upside. So this range itself creates a potential area, right, as a support or demand region here. But again, right, you can see pushing into this zone, right, we need the change in market structure on your lower time frame first, right? So with that, let's take a look at where we are right now. So on the weekly, right, you can see that we have this region. So I'll just keep the area here, right? So just notice this whole move. We're seeing that consolidation. You can see that price did not actually break and close to the downside. So let me just remove all of this so we can just see the price action here properly. Right, so on the monthly, you're sitting on some kind of support region, right? We highlighted the doji previously, which is really here. Right, if you want to narrow down the region, right, this is a potential area. If you move to the lower time frame, right, if you move down to the weekly, you can see this zone, right? So again, this whole move to the downside, you're seeing bearish market structure. Lower lows and lower highs, you're seeing that consolidation to the downside here. Price swept below the low, but it did not break and close below this zone. Right, so this is where we are right now. So we have two things. One is that you can see price came into the zone, it created a high on the weekly, right? This was the high that caused that pullback. So if I had to just draw out this move, you can see it's basically this move here. So prices were forming lower lows and lower highs. It swept slightly above, came back in to tap the low, right? So this is where we are. So if the lower time frame starts turning bullish, right, it creates this as a potential target on the weekly. If we move down to the daily time frame, on the daily, you can see this move here, right? So we have, again, lower lows, lower highs. And then what happens beyond that, you can see that price broke and closed above this zone. So it creates this on the daily as a potential demand. Okay, so let me just highlight this region here. Right, so it doesn't mean that when price comes into this zone, right, we will definitely see a reversal, right? We could be having a case where price just breaks below this zone, given that the higher time frame, right, this is the monthly region, right? So price could come much deeper into this region before we see any another consolidation. So within this zone, you can see again, right, this is the daily. So this whole move to the downside, you're again seeing lower lows and lower highs. So this whole move, at least on the daily, right, where we are right now, you can see on the daily still bearish, right? This region, we have a strong break to the downside here. It creates this as a supply area, right? This zone, right? So you can see price pushes in back into this area or test this region, and we have a sweep of this low. So two things, right? Right now it's in a range on the daily time frame, right? If price breaks and close above, so this is the low, you can see that price came in, tested it multiple times, right? So if price breaks and close above this high, this is the last high that caused the pullback, which is also the region that prices are currently testing. So again, if I were to just draw this out, you can see lower lows and lower highs. Price did a pullback here, back into the zone. So if you move down to the 4 hours time frame, you can see this, right? So lower lows and lower highs. You can see price did a pullback and then broke and closed to the upside. So that's on the 4 hours time frame. This area, you can see that on the 4 hours, price came in. It's testing this demand region here. We're seeing that pullback, right? So if we wait for this zone, right, we're waiting for basically a break and close off to the upside here on the daily, right? So if price breaks and close to the upside, it creates this region as a potential demand. Right, but where we are right now, honestly, the setup right now, it's not that clear for me, right? So we're seeing this range here. We have a demand area that's lying slightly below, right? Within this range itself, you're seeing a sweep or test of this zone multiple times. You have a high that price have yet to break and close above. So if price breaks and close above this area, it creates this zone as a potential demand. But if not, right, we could still see a move to the downside. Right, so that's Bitcoin for me. But if this region, you can see that this whole area, right? So if price does a pullback into this zone and it starts turning bullish on the lower time frame, on the daily, right? This high that caused the pullback becomes a potential target. Okay, so depending on if price breaks and close above this, right, you could see potential for further move up with this high, right? If not, if price pushes into this zone, you can again see lower lows and lower highs, right? So this is the view for me right now on Bitcoin. Okay, so I hope that answers most of the questions, right? I think if we have no other questions, right, that's what we have for today. Right, so for tomorrow, we will be doing our educational series as well. The live analysis session, right? So tomorrow's session will be headed by Chun Hao. So you can just sign up for the session. Just go to vantagemarkets.com, right? Check the schedule and the topics. Right, so come with your questions as well, right? So for tomorrow, it's a live analysis session. We will be covering on the majors. And if you have any charts that you want us to review, just put them under the questions chat. Okay, so with that, we've come to the end of this session, right? Thanks, everyone, right? Thanks for making it an interactive session. So we will catch you guys again tomorrow.